Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today, we're tackling the Ming Dynasty. We've got some Wikipedia excerpts to work with, and we're going to dig into those to uncover some really fascinating stuff about this period in Chinese history, like way beyond the typical textbook stuff. You know?
Yeah, I think what's so cool about the Ming Dynasty is you see this, this blend of holding on to traditions, but also embracing these huge changes.
Yeah.
I mean, they came about after the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty collapsed, but it's super interesting how they actually used parts of that, like that Yuan legacy.
Okay, so let's rewind for a sec. Like, what actually caused the Yuan dynasty to fall apart in the first place?
Well, okay, imagine like a society that's just riddled with ethnic discrimination. People are burdened by all these crazy taxes, and then boom, the Yellow River floods.
Oh, wow.
Causing, just massive devastation, economic turmoil. And that was the Yuan dynasty, basically, in its final years. So, it's not surprising that rebellions just started popping up everywhere,
Makes sense. People push to their breaking point, they're going to fight back.
Exactly.
And it's from all this chaos that Zhu Yonzheng comes onto the scene.
Right.
Right. He goes from, a penniless peasant and Buddhist monk to founding the Ming Dynasty.
It's amazing.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, totally.
Talk about a glow-up.
Right. He joined the Red Turban Rebellion, which was linked to the White Lotus secret society. I mean, talk about intrigue, right?
For real.
But his rise to power wasn't just lucky breaks or anything. He was a seriously brilliant military strategist.
So it wasn't just being in the right place at the right time.
Not at all, no. One pivotal moment was the Battle of Lake Poyang in 1363. So Zhu Yonzheng, he's outnumbered 3-1, right?
Oh, wow.
He uses fire ships to completely outmaneuver and just decimate his opponent's forces. And it was this display of tactical genius that really solidified his control over southern China.
Can you imagine that scene? 200,000 Ming sailors engaging in this, fiery naval battle on Lake Poyang.
Oh, yeah.
That must have been something else.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this victory paved the way for him to declare the Ming Dynasty just a few years later, right?
So 1368 rolls around.
Yeah, 1368.
The last Yuan emperor's out of there.
Gone.
Zhu Yonzheng declares himself the Hongwu emperor, and boom, the Ming Dynasty is born.
Exactly.
And then he immediately focuses on rebuilding.
Rebuilding, yep. New legal code, restored infrastructure, consolidating that power.
He sounds like a real decisive leader.
Yeah,
ambitious.
For sure.
But you mentioned earlier that the Ming, borrowed from the Yuan dynasty.
Yes.
Which seems, I don't know, counterintuitive, right? Why would he incorporate elements of the very system he overthrew?
Right. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'd think he'd want to, erase every trace of Mongol rule, but he was really strategic about it. He integrated certain aspects of their administration, even resettled Mongols within his territory. It wasn't about just blind imitation. It was calculated, legitimize his rule, ensure stability during this transition,
So instead of a clean break, he uses elements of the Yuan to kind of strengthen his own position. It's like a political judo move.
Exactly.
I like it. But I've also read that the Hongwu emperor had kind of a ruthless side.
Oh, yeah.
Is that true?
Yes, unfortunately.
Oh.
Hongwu emperor, while effective,
yeah,
definitely became increasingly just kind of authoritarian.
Oh.
As his reign went on, he abolished the chancellery, which was essentially getting rid of the entire prime minister's office.
Wow.
And then he established this secret police force to monitor dissent.
Sounds like kind of a dark turn for a leader who started as this champion of the people against oppressive rule.
It was, yeah. And historians estimate that his purges led to the execution of around 100,000 people. So, yeah, his reign serves as a reminder that even those who begin with really noble intentions can be corrupted by absolute power,
Yeah, it's chilling, actually. But the Ming Dynasty, though, they weren't just focused on internal affairs, right?
Right.
They also expanded their empire, significantly.
Oh, yeah, they did, for sure. One key area was in the southwest, where the Ming armies conquered Yunnan in 1381.
Okay.
And this region was formerly part of the Dali Kingdom, and it was super strategically important.
So what was their approach to governing this newly acquired territory? Did they impose their rule directly, or did they take a more hands-off approach?
They went for large-scale integration, full on.
Okay.
The conquest of Yunnan was followed by this massive wave of colonization. By the end of the 14th century, something like 200,000 military colonists were settled there, And over time, this number swelled to almost 500,000 Chinese settlers.
Wow.
So this influx significantly altered the ethnic makeup of the region.
Yeah, that's huge. It's like demographically, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't a smooth transition either.
Right.
This influx of settlers led to, resentment, resistance.
Yeah.
Particularly from indigenous groups like the Miao and Yao, who revolted against Ming rule. And these conflicts really highlight the challenges of, trying to integrate diverse populations and cultures within this expanding empire.
It's a reminder that expansion isn't always just like a simple story of victory and progress.
Right.
It often comes with, conflict and cultural clashes and the displacement of existing populations.
Absolutely.
But the Southwest wasn't the only direction the Ming Dynasty was looking.
Yep.
They also had to deal with, the remnants of Mongol power in the Northeast.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, even though they toppled the Yuan dynasty, they still faced a threat from some powerful Mongol leaders in Manchuria.
Oh, wow.
And one such leader was Nagachu.
Okay.
He commanded this formidable force, posed a significant challenge to Ming authority.
So how did they handle this, persistent Mongol threat on their northern border? Did they try to, negotiate, or did they go with military force?
They chose a decisive military approach.
Okay.
Yeah, in 1387, they launched this major campaign against Nagachu.
Wow.
Which ultimately led to his surrender and the Ming conquest of Manchuria.
Okay.
But what's interesting is their approach to controlling this region was very different from the Mongols.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't impose the same level of direct control, didn't try to assimilate the local population, which would have, far-reaching consequences for their frontier policies.
It sounds like they learned from the mistakes of their predecessors, recognizing that a more nuanced approach to frontier control might be more effective.
Yeah, for sure.
Did this same principle apply to their dealings with Tibet?
That's a really complex question.
Okay.
The nature of Ming control over Tibet is this ongoing debate among historians.
Yeah.
Some argue it was like a loose form of suzerainty, where they exerted influence without direct rule.
So, unlike their direct control over Yunnan, their relationship with Tibet was more about influence than, outright domination.
It seems that way, yeah. And one interesting thing is they didn't establish permanent garrisons in Tibet, like the Mongols had. So this suggests maybe a different approach to projecting power, maybe relying more on diplomacy and those religious ties,
right,
particularly through Buddhism.
Right, which held a lot of influence in Tibet.
Exactly.
But wasn't the Hongwu emperor suspicious of Buddhism?
He was.
So wouldn't that have complicated their relationship with Tibet?
Yeah, that's a great point. His own, religious leanings definitely created some friction.
Right.
But the relationship with Tibet remained relatively stable during his reign.
Oh, okay.
But it's important to remember this relationship wasn't static.
Yeah.
It evolved over time with periods of greater Ming involvement and then others marked by, distance and tension.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act, navigating those religious differences, the political considerations, while also trying to maintain stability on their western frontier.
Yeah.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground already. From the fall of the Yuan to the rise of the Ming, the Hongwu emperor's reign, their expansion into Yunnan and Manchuria. It's a lot to take in. But what happened next? Did they continue on this path of, expansion, consolidation, or did they hit some new challenges?
Well, the transition of power after the Hongwu emperor wasn't quite as smooth as you might think.
Really?
Yeah, and actually this next chapter, it's really pivotal because it marks a real turning point in the Ming Dynasty's whole trajectory.
Ooh, this sounds intriguing. What happened? Did they face internal strife, or were there external threats? What went down?
It was a little of both, actually. When the Hongwu emperor died in 1398, he had designated his grandson, Zhu Yunwen, as his successor.
Okay.
So he took the throne as the Jianwen emperor. But his reign was, short-lived, and it was marked by conflict.
Why was that? Was he just a weak ruler?
Not necessarily. He had some pretty ambitious reforms in mind, actually.
Okay.
But his attempts to centralize power and kind of curtail the influence of his uncles, particularly Zhu Dai, the Prince of Yan, it sparked this fierce backlash.
Oh, like family drama within the imperial family. That can't be good.
Right. It led to a full-blown civil war.
Oh, wow.
Known as the Jingnan Campaign. So Zhu Dai, this powerful, ambitious figure, he challenges his nephew's right to the throne.
Wow.
And this conflict just plunged the Ming Dynasty into this period of violence and uncertainty.
Sounds like a Shakespearean tragedy. You know, ambitions clashing, family ties severed,
Yeah.
and a war that could literally tear the empire apart.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fitting analogy.
Yeah.
And this civil war, it had profound consequences for the Ming Dynasty. I mean, it would determine the future course of the empire, the fate of its emperors, and ultimately, the legacy of the Ming Dynasty itself.
This is getting really interesting. It seems like we're on the verge of this major turning point in the Ming Dynasty's history.
For sure.
But I guess we'll have to wait for part 2 to find out what happens next in this this gripping saga of power, ambition, and the fate of an empire.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Ming Dynasty. Last time we left off with this intense family drama.
Oh, yeah.
Unfolding. The Jingnan campaign, Zhu Di, the Hongwu emperor's son, is challenging his own nephew, the Jianwen emperor, for the throne.
It's crazy.
What a way to start the 15th century, right?
I know. It was a wild time for sure.
So this wasn't just a little, family squabble. This was a full-blown civil war that raged on for 4 years.
4 years.
Wow, the stakes must have been incredibly high for both sides.
For sure.
So who ultimately came out on top in this power struggle?
Well, as you might have guessed, Zhu Dai emerged victorious.
Okay.
He captured Nanjing in 1402, and the Jianwen emperor
kind of mysteriously disappeared.
Oh.
Although a lot of people believe he died in a palace fire.
Right.
So Zhu Dai takes the throne, becomes the Yongle emperor.
Okay, so a new emperor, a new era for the Ming Dynasty, but coming to power through a civil war like that must have created, I don't know, a lot of tension.
Oh, yeah.
Instability.
Big time.
How did the Yongle emperor try to, solidify his rule and legitimize his claim to the throne?
He had this, multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
First, he launched this massive propaganda campaign to discredit the Jianwen emperor.
Right.
And really portray himself as the rightful heir.
Okay.
He also reversed a lot of his father's policies, which had become pretty unpopular. And he started these really ambitious projects to demonstrate his strength, his vision.
It makes sense, He needed to win over the people.
Absolutely.
Show them he was capable of leading.
Yeah.
So what kind of projects did he take on?
Well, one of the most symbolicest was moving the capital from Nanjing back to Beijing.
Whoa, okay.
Which was huge. It involved constructing this massive new imperial palace complex, the Forbidden City.
Oh, wow.
And restoring the Grand Canal, which was this vital waterway that connected North and South China.
Wait, the Forbidden City?
Yeah.
That, iconic symbol of Chinese imperial power.
Yes.
He built that.
He did, yeah.
Wow.
The Yongle Emperor envisioned Beijing as, this new center of the Ming Empire. In the Forbidden City, it was like a physical manifestation of that whole vision.
Yeah.
It was a statement of power and authority designed to just awe and inspire.
That's incredible, just moving an entire capital city and building something as grand as the Forbidden City.
I know.
That must have taken immense resources and manpower.
Oh, for sure.
What was the purpose of restoring the Grand Canal?
So Grand Canal, it played this crucial role in transporting grain.
Okay.
Other goods from the south.
Okay.
Which was agriculturally rich, up to the north, including the capital.
Right.
And by restoring it, he ensured this steady supply of food resources to Beijing, which strengthened his control over the empire. It was a strategic move to consolidate power, enhance economic stability.
So he wasn't just about, grand gestures,
Right.
He was also thinking strategically about the long-term needs of the empire.
Yeah, absolutely.
But beyond these impressive construction projects,
yes,
did he make any other, significant changes during his reign?
Oh, yeah. He was a very ambitious ruler, let me tell you.
Okay.
One of his most notable initiatives was reviving maritime exploration.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, remember how the Hongwu emperor was, pretty isolationist?
Yeah.
But the Yongle emperor, he saw the potential of expanding China's influence overseas.
So he was a bit of a contrast to his father in that regard.
Yeah, definitely.
What did this maritime exploration, entail? What was he doing?
He commissioned this series of voyages. Led by this remarkable figure, Zheng, a eunuch admiral. And these voyages, they were unlike anything the world had ever seen.
Really?
Yeah, Zheng. He commanded these massive fleets of treasure ships. Some of which were, over 400 feet long.
Whoa, 400 feet?
Yeah, dwarfing even like the largest European ships at the time.
That's longer than a football field.
I know, right?
What was the purpose of these voyages? Were they purely exploratory, or did they have a more, like, specific goal in mind?
They were kind of multifaceted.
Okay.
I mean, they showcased Ming power and technology, established diplomatic ties with like over 30 countries, facilitated trade, and brought back all these exotic goods and knowledge to China. And they sailed all across the Indian Ocean, reaching as far as Arabia and East Africa.
Wow, that's a vast area.
It is.
These voyages must have been just like incredible feats of navigation and seamanship.
They were really impressive.
So did these expeditions have like a lasting impact on the Ming Dynasty? Did they lead to, I don't know, the establishment of like overseas colonies or trading posts?
That's a great question. And it's actually debated by historians.
Okay.
While the voyages were like super impressive, their long-term impact is still kind of up in the air.
Okay.
So the Ming Dynasty, they didn't establish permanent overseas colonies like the Europeans would later do.
Right.
And the voyages were eventually discontinued due to their cost, and there was this like shift in priorities back towards, internal affairs.
So it was more about kind of, I don't know, demonstrating power, exploring the world, and actually establishing a permanent presence overseas.
Exactly.
Interesting to think how history might have been different if the Ming had continued, pursued this like expansionist policy like the Europeans would later on.
For sure.
But let's shift gears for a sec. We've talked about the Yongle Emperor's achievements, but did his reign face any like setbacks or challenges?
It did. And one notable event was the Tumu crisis in 1449.
Okay, what happened?
So the Oirat Mongols, who had been kind of this constant, thorn in the Ming side, they launched a surprise attack. And get this, they actually captured the Ming emperor.
No way.
Yeah, Yingzong.
The emperor was captured.
The saddle, yeah.
That must have been, like, shocking for the Ming court.
Oh, it sent shockwaves, for sure.
So what happened? Did the Oirats demand a ransom?
They did, yeah.
Okay.
But it was more complicated than just a simple ransom demand.
Okay.
While Yingzong was being held captive, his brother actually took the throne.
Oh, wow.
As the Jingtai emperor.
Okay.
So it created this, like, delicate situation.
Right. You've got a captive emperor, a new emperor on the throne, and the Oirats are like, give us money.
Right. Sounds like a recipe for chaos.
Yeah.
It was. The Ming court was divided over, like, how to handle it all. Some people said pay the ransom.
Right.
Others worried it would, like, embolden the Oirats, make the Ming look weak.
Right.
In the end, they refused to pay.
Okay.
And the Oirats eventually released Yingzong.
Really?
Yeah, they realized they couldn't really exploit the situation.
Huh. So what happened to Yingzong when he came back to the Ming court? Was he welcomed back as emperor, or did his capture, kind of tarnish his reputation?
It was a bit of a mess, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yingzong's brother, the Jingtai emperor, wasn't really keen on giving up the throne.
Right.
So it led to this period of, like, tension and intrigue.
Yeah.
Culminating in Yingzong actually regaining power.
Oh, wow.
In a palace coup in 1457.
So he was emperor again.
Yeah.
But this capture must have had a lasting impact.
Oh, absolutely.
On him and the Ming Dynasty.
For sure.
So did this event, like, change their approach to dealing with the Mongols?
It did, yeah. The Tumu crisis exposed, like, vulnerabilities in the Ming military, and it really highlighted that ongoing Mongol threat.
Right.
So it led to reforms to strengthen the military and kind of a more cautious approach to frontier defense.
Okay.
Like, they focused on reinforcing the Great Wall.
Okay.
Adopting a more defensive posture.
It seems like a real turning point, Yeah. Moving away from the expansionist ambitions of the Yongle era towards a more cautious and, like, defensive strategy.
Exactly.
Did this shift in policy continue after Yingzong's reign?
Well, that's where things get, interesting again. The next notable emperor, the Wanli Emperor, who reigned from 1572 to 1620.
Okay.
He faced this whole different set of challenges.
Like what?
So he inherited this empire that was grappling with fiscal problems, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and this growing sense of, like, complacency.
Complacency? What do you mean by that?
Well, after decades of, like, relative peace and prosperity, the Ming court had become kind of, like, inward-looking, Yeah. There was a lot of, like, factional infighting, corruption, this lack of urgency in addressing the empire's problems.
Oh, so they were just kind of resting on their laurels.
A bit, yeah. And the Wanli Emperor himself, he actually contributed to this decline.
Oh, really? How so?
He became disillusioned with court politics.
Okay.
And he actually withdrew from active rule.
What? So who was running things?
He left the government largely in the hands of eunuchs.
Wait, eunuchs?
Yeah.
I thought they weren't supposed to have political power.
Right.
Didn't the Hongwu Emperor, specifically forbid them from meddling in state affairs?
He did, yeah. But over time, eunuchs had, gradually gained influence within the palace.
Okay.
They served as advisors, confidants, intermediaries between the emperor and his officials.
Okay.
And then Wanli's withdrawal from active rule, it created this, power vacuum.
Yeah.
And the eunuchs were, ready to fill it.
So it was like a combination of the emperor's disengagement and the eunuchs' ambition that led to their rise in power.
Exactly. And this power shift had big consequences.
Yeah.
Because eunuchs, they didn't have the same training qualifications as scholar officials.
Right.
So they often used their positions for personal gain.
Led
to more corruption.
Okay.
Inefficiency.
Right.
Which further eroded the Ming government.
Right.
Contributed to a growing sense of discontent among the people.
So you've got an emperor who's checked out.
Yeah.
A power vacuum filled by ambitious and often corrupt eunuchs. And this growing sense of unease among the people.
Yep.
Not a good combination.
No.
So what happens next? Does the Ming Dynasty manage to, pull itself out of this downward spiral? Or do things just continue to deteriorate?
Unfortunately, the Ming Dynasty's troubles weren't over.
Oh.
In fact, things were about to get much worse.
Really?
Yeah.
How much worse?
A series of internal and external crises were converging, threatening to shake the very foundation of the empire.
This is a cliffhanger. What kind of crises are we talking about? Did those Mongol threats reemerge, or was it something else entirely?
Well, the Mongols were still a factor.
Okay.
But a new threat was rising in the north.
Okay.
A force that would ultimately prove to be the Ming Dynasty's undoing.
Okay.
And on the home front, the Ming were facing economic turmoil.
Oh.
Natural disasters.
Right.
And, a resurgence of those peasant rebellions.
Okay.
All of these factors combined to create this, perfect storm.
Yeah.
That would challenge the Ming Dynasty's very survival.
Wow. It sounds like we're heading into some really turbulent times.
Oh, yeah.
I'm eager to hear more about these crises and how they ultimately led to the fall of the Ming Dynasty. But I guess we'll have to wait for part 3 of our deep dive to uncover the final chapters of this, captivating story. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Ming Dynasty. We left off with the Ming facing a whole bunch of problems. Eunuchs running the show, the economy's a mess, and there are these whispers of new threats on the horizon. It sounds like things are about to get, really intense.
Yeah, you could say that. The late Ming period, it's fascinating. It's this tragic study in how these internal weaknesses can just make an empire vulnerable to collapse. Remember those peasant rebellions we talked about earlier? They were a symptom of these deeper issues, Yeah. Economic hardship, government corruption, and just this feeling that the Ming court was totally out of touch with what people needed.
So these weren't just isolated incidents. They represented a more widespread discontent.
Exactly. And one of these rebellions would actually prove fatal for the Ming.
Oh, wow.
It was led by Li Zicheng.
Okay.
And this guy, he started as a minor postal worker.
Really?
But he rose to become this powerful rebel leader.
From postal worker to rebel leader.
Yeah.
What sparked that transformation?
Well, so Li Zicheng was actually dismissed from his job.
Okay.
And for him, that symbolized everything that was wrong with the Ming government, incompetence, disregard for ordinary people. So he joined a rebel group, and he quickly rose through the ranks because he was just really charismatic.
Okay.
And a skilled military leader.
So he tapped into that growing discontent.
Exactly.
And channeled it into this rebellion.
Precisely. And his rebellion gained momentum as more and more people just flocked to his banner.
Yeah.
And they were driven by desperation, anger. They were tired of the taxes, the corrupt officials, and just the government's failure to do anything about the famines, the natural disasters.
Right. It's a classic example of how internal problems can create opportunities, right?
Yeah.
For someone like Li Zicheng. So how did he go from leading a rebellion to actually toppling the entire Ming Dynasty?
Well, so his forces, they steadily gained strength, right?
Oh,
Could
yeah.
capture these key cities and provinces. And by 1644, Li Zicheng felt confident enough to march on Beijing,
Whoa.
the heart of the Ming Empire.
So the capital's under siege. What happened next? Did the Ming just surrender?
Well, the last Ming emperor, Chongzhen, he was facing, the imminent fall of his capital, and he made this tragic decision. Rather than surrendering to the rebels, he took his own life. He hanged himself in the imperial garden.
Wow. What a dramatic and heartbreaking end for an emperor who, despite his flaws, had tried to hold this crumbling empire together.
Yeah.
So Li Zicheng captures Beijing. The Ming Dynasty's no more. End of story, right?
Not quite. While Li Zicheng toppled the Ming, he wouldn't get to rule for long. Remember that other threat we talked about?
Right.
Rising in the north.
The new force that would prove to be the Ming's undoing? Who were they?
They were the Manchus, and they were from Manchuria. And they'd been unified under these really powerful leaders like Nurhaci and his son, Hong Taiji.
Okay.
And they'd established their own dynasty, the later Jin, and posed this growing threat to the Ming's northern borders.
So while the Ming were totally preoccupied with internal rebellions, the Manchus were building up their strength, just waiting for an opportunity to strike.
Exactly. And that opportunity came with the fall of Beijing.
Okay.
They saw the Ming Dynasty in total disarray.
Yeah.
And, they seized their chance. They allied with a Ming general named Wu Songui.
Wait, hold on. A Ming general sided with the Manchus? Why would he do that?
Well, Wu Songui was in a really tough spot,
Okay.
He was facing the Manchu threat from the north and Li Zicheng's rebels from the south. He kind of saw the Manchus as the lesser of two evils.
Right.
And thought aligning with them was the best way to preserve order and protect his own interests.
So he made it a calculated decision,
Yeah.
even if it meant betraying his own dynasty.
Did, yeah.
What happened next? Did the Manchus and Wu Sangui join forces to crush Li Zicheng?
They did. With Wu Sangui's help, the Manchu armies just swept south, defeated Li Zicheng's forces, and captured Beijing in 1644.
Wow.
And that marked the end of the Ming Dynasty and the beginning of the Qing Dynasty.
Wow. It's amazing how quickly the situation changed. One moment, it seemed like the Ming Dynasty was secure.
Right.
And then within a few short years, it was over.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that even the most powerful empires are vulnerable to collapse when you've got that combination of internal weakness and external pressure.
Yeah.
The Ming's fall, it's this complex story with a lot of contributing factors.
Yeah.
From economic woes and bureaucratic corruption to the rise of ambitious individuals like Li Zicheng and, of course, the growing power of the Manchus.
But even though the Ming Dynasty fell, their legacy lived on, right? We talked about their achievements, the cultural contributions, their impact on Chinese history.
Absolutely. They left an indelible mark on China. From the grandeur of the Forbidden City to the voyages of Zheng He, from the flourishing of art and literature to the expansion of the empire's borders, the Ming era was a time of significant change and innovation.
And even though they faced challenges and ultimately collapsed, their accomplishments and failures, they offer these valuable lessons for understanding the complexities of governance, the dynamics of power, and just the ever-changing tides of history.
I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
The Ming Dynasty reminds us that history isn't like this straight line. It's more like a tapestry woven with triumphs and tragedies, ambition and corruption, resilience and decline. And by studying these events, I think we can gain a deeper understanding of, the forces that shape our world, the challenges of leadership, and the enduring legacy of those who came before us.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Ming Dynasty. We hope you enjoyed this journey through time, exploring the rise and fall of this fascinating and complex empire.
It's been a pleasure.